Welcome to Darkness Notes Coaches, terrifying secrets, and mysterious stories that will make you tremble. In the frozen silence of 1747, 4 women vanished into the snow, leaving behind warm beds, full pantries and blood in the shape of a circle behind their cabin. Their husband, a man who claimed God whispered secrets through the walls, but what he built beneath them was not a home. It was a vault for sacrifice. There are stories that never make it into your textbooks, not because they were disproven but because they were too dangerous to teach. What happened in the Utah Territory in the winter of 1747 was not recorded in history books. It was buried beneath them, and every attempt to exhume the truth has either ended in silence or madness. Ezekiel Whitmore was not just a pioneer, he was a builder, a craftsman, a devout believer, but also something else, a man quietly obsessed with the divine mathematics of blood. He didn't believe in family, he believed in celestial architecture. A family wasn't for love, it was for power, a stairway of souls toward eternity. And every wife, wrong. He didn't speak often, but when he did, people listened, not because of charm but because it felt like something ancient was speaking through him, and what it said was disturbing. The settlement had barely been carved out of the snow. Wolves still circled the outer edges at night. The cold was so intense. Men reportedly died in their sleep from breathing too shallow, but within the walls of the Whitmore cabin, there was warmth, food, laughter, the illusion of harmony, until December 19th. 4 women, each legally bound to him under the early Mormon doctrine of plural marriage, were last seen at the cabin door, their eyes hollow, their smiles too slow. A passing hunter said it looked like they were rehearsing being human. 2 weeks later, Ezekiel appeared in town, alone, his beard overgrown, his eyes wild. He claimed each wife had received divine callings to return east, in midwinter, through wolf territory, without horses, without escort, without proof. The church kept their records. The bishop wrote in a secret diary, "I fear Brother Whitmore may not be receiving messages from heaven but from something darker, older, and hungry. You're not just watching a story, you're being initiated into it. There's something you must understand before we go any further. When history is erased, it doesn't disappear, it mutates. It festers, it slips through cracks in the collective memory and comes back as legend, harmless, sanitized, safe. But what you're hearing now is the version they tried to cauterize with silence." When the snow melted in the spring of 1748, Bishop Almiron Curtis led a small group of men back to the Whitmore homestead. He claimed it was for inventory purposes, supplies, tools, anything of use for the growing settlement, but his real mission was far darker. The bishop had seen too many cracks in Ezekiel's story. The wives, he now believed, were not just missing, they were sacrificed. The cabin stood intact, but wrong, not broken into, not burned, but quiet, in a way that felt staged. Like a play after the curtain falls, the scene still intact, but the actors long gone. Dust lay untouched on the windowsills, furniture remained in place. The hearth was cold but beneath it, a seam in the stone. They pulled it open, and what they found underneath would never make it into any official record. A chamber, dug by hand, reinforced with timber, symbols carved into the beams, not Mormon glyphs, but something older, something twisted. On the walls, names scratched in charcoal, over and over again. Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, Ruth, a final word beneath them, sealed. The bishop found a book, handwritten, bound in deer hide, inside Ezekiel's theology, or perhaps his madness. He called it the doctrine of consecration, but it bore no resemblance to anything canon. He spoke of blood spirals, of ascending through sacrifice, of opening the veil from beneath, and then, on the final page, a single sentence written in what investigators swore was dried blood. To build the eternal family, one must first dissolve the mortal. The men said nothing. They sealed the chamber, they burned the book. Bishop Curtis kept one thing: Rebecca's journal. Its final entry read, "He says the voices speak from the floorboards now, that they want to be born again. We are fasting, we are kneeling, but I think the altar is already beneath us." They told no one, but secrecy is a fragile barrier, especially when the land remembers. If you're still watching, you're beginning to see it too. You were raised to believe in progress and logic, that time moves forward like a clean arrow, always improving, always rising. But beneath that myth lies something older, colder, and far more real. The spiral. The spiral doesn't move forward, it circles, it descends, and the deeper it goes, the more it sheds light, truth, and reason until only the raw architecture of power remains. This is where Ezekiel Whitmore lived, not in history, but in the spiral. After the bishop's visit, The church made a decision not based on faith, but on containment. They sealed the Whitmore land. Official records list it as unsuitable for habitation. No explanation, number, investigation, just silence. The foundation stones were removed and scattered. The pit under the hearth was filled with lime and ash. But none of them asked the most obvious question. Why did he dig downward, not outward, not into the hills, but into the earth beneath his family's feet? You see, Ezekiel wasn't alone in his beliefs. His journals reference names, men in other territories, private letters exchanged in code. A fringe theology whispered among early settlers. They called themselves the builders. Their doctrine, that beneath Zion, beneath every holy structure, was a mirror temple, a place where sin was transformed into obedience, and blood into covenant. In this twisted reflection of the gospel, sacrifice wasn't symbolic, it was literal, and each wife a cornerstone. Church elders found a symbol scorched into the base of the fireplace, charcoal rubbed into the grain, then burned over with oil. It matched carvings found in 2 other early Utah settlements, both sites of mysterious disappearances later blamed on native raids, though no tribal evidence was ever found. But here's what they don't tell you. In both places, Ezekiel had traveled months before the events occurred. Coincidence? Or blueprint? They call it heresy, madness, myth. But you're beginning to see through the veil, aren't you? Good, because the deeper we go, the more obvious it becomes. This wasn't a one-time event. It was a ritual, a pattern, a doorway, and what came through it didn't leave. You feel it, don't you? That quiet voice just beneath the noise. The pressure in your chest, like something old is waking up. That's not fear, that's remembrance. Because the deeper we descend into the Whitmore case, the more it stops feeling like a story about the past and starts feeling like something that's always been here, waiting, watching, echoing. Ezekiel didn't just believe in blood as ritual, he believed in blood as language. His private writings, never meant to be seen, describe the grammar of sacrifice, where each offering, each wound, each disappearance translated into some celestial message. One passage reads, each vein, cut in order, becomes a sentence, each wife, a word. The father reads from the altar like a scroll written in flesh. Insanity, maybe, but the frightening thing is how precise he was. His diagrams of anatomy weren't crude, they were surgical. His margins were filled with equations, numbers repeated over and over again, 4, 8, 12, 33, at first glance, just math. But when layered over a map of the Utah territory, the numbers revealed something else entirely, a grid, a geometric alignment. For disappearances, 8 settlements, 12 ritual sites, 33 degrees from Salt Lake to a point in Nevada where a stone circle was discovered decades later, buried under 18 feet of soil, a circle identical in design to the one burned into Ezekiel's cabin floor. This wasn't personal, it was architectural. Someone or something was trying to build through him. And the wives, they weren't victims in his theology. They were vessels, keys, each chosen for specific traits: bloodline, obedience, intuition. In one notebook entry, Ezekiel writes, Sarah for devotion, Rebecca for sight, Mary for womb, Ruth for will, for gates, for seals. When opened together, the family eternal will rise beneath the temple of dust. What temple, what dust? No one knows, because by the time investigators returned, Ezekiel was gone. No footprints, no trace, just a clean fire pit and 4 small piles of ash arranged in a perfect square behind the cabin. Each pile contained bone fragments, each with a carved ring placed neatly on top. Still think this is just folklore? Comment: for gates are opening twice below to prove you're not just watching but awakening. By now, you understand we're not talking about a missing persons case. We're talking about a ritualized disappearance of identity itself. What Ezekiel Whitmore orchestrated in the Utah territory wasn't just about for women. It was about undoing the boundaries between life and something much older, something that doesn't walk, doesn't speak, but requires. Let me show you how deep this goes. In 1920, 173 years after the disappearances, the church quietly authorized the construction of a new meetinghouse near Mill Creek on the exact site of the Whitmore homestead. Officially, it was a matter of practicality, expanding congregational space, but the land had been blacklisted for decades. Why build there? Because secrets don't die, they wait to be reused. During excavation, workers broke through what they thought was an old root cellar. What they found was something else entirely, a vaulted chamber, bone-dry despite a century of snowfall and spring floods. Along the inner walls were preserved carvings burned deep into the timber, the same 4 names, the same sigils, and one new phrase: "They are not gone, they are beneath." The discovery was never reported to the public. Construction halted. For 2 weeks, church leaders arrived, unannounced, and cordoned off the site. Workers were paid hush money. All photographs were confiscated. And when the church reopened the project, the foundation was filled with reinforced concrete, the normal depth, not to preserve history, but to suffocate it. But the land resisted. Over the next 5 years, 6 different families assigned to the new meetinghouse reported identical phenomena: dreams of a woman in a grey dress standing behind the pulpit, visions of 4 figures walking, single file along the frozen creek bed, children waking with ash on their fingertips. One bishop resigned abruptly, citing doctrinal confusion and nocturnal visitations. His final sermon referenced Ezekiel Whitmore by name, though no records suggested the congregation had ever been taught about him. So what made him say it? And why, 3 months later, did he drive west into the Nevada desert and vanish? What we're uncovering isn't just the story of one man, it's a blueprint for psychological control wrapped in divine symbolism, a system that uses ritual, faith, and isolation to erase resistance. And if Ezekiel was just one node in a larger design, then we're not uncovering history, we're trespassing into something sacred, to something else. You've been trained, whether you realize it or not, to dismiss what doesn't fit the official narrative, to laugh off what disturbs you, to label it myth, madness, or misunderstanding. That's not coincidence. That's conditioning. Because the truth isn't just hidden, it's designed to repel you. The farther we follow Ezekiel Whitmore's descent, the clearer this becomes. His 4 wives weren't selected randomly. Each was taken from bloodlines associated with early, undocumented convert families with strange patterns of dreams, visions, and spontaneous revelations long before they ever heard of Mormonism. That's not theology. That's genetic targeting. Church records those few that survived the 1920 purges hint at what they called the Concordance women, converts who arrived with uncanny synchronicity in Missouri, Nauvoo, and finally, Utah, always in groups of 4, always with one who claimed dreams of men in dust-colored robes, always vanishing within a generation. Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, Ruth, the final set, according to Ezekiel's writings. He didn't choose them, he was instructed. One notebook page reads, "I did not select them, they arrived already aligned. 4 points, for virtues, 1 circle. Their presence summoned the architecture, I merely obeyed." You see what that means? He believed he wasn't the author of the ritual, he was the instrument. A carpenter, yes, but not of homes, of thresholds. That makes the discovery under the cabin in 1920 even more horrifying, because the chamber they found wasn't empty, it was wired. Primitive copper wiring, coiled into spirals and embedded into the wooden beams. The configuration matched ancient Mesopotamian voice chambers used in ziggurats to project sound, except this wasn't about projection. It was about amplification. Something was meant to hear from below. And if that chamber was an altar, then the wives weren't murdered, they were transformed, not killed. Translated, that's the darkest part of this story. Ezekiel didn't see what he did as crime, he saw it as completion. The elevation of his family beyond mortality, a family sealed not by paper or priesthood, but by blood and voltage. And if you think that sounds impossible, ask yourself, why did church authorities fill the chamber with industrial concrete, and then lie about its existence? Why seal the tomb, if nothing inside could still speak? Power always hides behind righteousness. It wears robes, it quotes scripture, it smiles while it feeds. Ezekiel Whitmore didn't invent the ritual, he discovered it encoded in the cracks between sanctioned doctrine and ancient hunger. And once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. But what if the church didn't just tolerate his descent? What if they needed it? You need to understand how desperate things were in 1747. The Mormon settlers had been chased, hunted, scattered. Missouri had burned them, Illinois exiled them. And now they stood isolated in a frozen desert, surrounded by silence and sky. The promise of Zion was collapsing under starvation and madness. It was in that spiritual vacuum that the builders emerged. A secret faction, not heretical, not disloyal but practical. They believed that heaven was not something given, but constructed. Brick by brick, blood by blood, they began to look not to God, but beneath God. And Ezekiel was the first to take it all the way. Documents unearthed in the private archives of the LDS Church, never released, publicly mention a pattern of Whitmore that newer settlements were warned not to repeat. The phrasing was careful, bureaucratic, but one memo, unsigned and undated, included this phrase: Do not allow spatial isolation of more than 4 wives under one roof in unmonitored conditions. Pattern of Whitmore shows tendency toward unauthorized. Sacral innovation. Sacral innovation. That's how they described ritual blood offerings and human consecration, not crime. Not murder innovation. Which means the church knew. Not everything, but enough. Enough to fear replication. Enough to rewrite protocols. Enough to bury the site under concrete and prayers and bureaucracy. And still, stories crept out. Children in the area reporting dreams of a man with no face, carving symbols into their bedroom walls. A young convert who vanished during a solo pilgrimage to Mill Creek, leaving behind only a single journal page that read, "I heard the breath beneath the stone. It said, 'Four made the gate. One must open it.' You feel it now, don't you? This isn't about one family, one man, one faith. This is about an ancient technology of control, a sacred geometry of obedience, and you were never supposed to find it. By now, your mind is split in two. One side clings to the world you've known, rules, reason, religion. The other, it's standing at the mouth of a tunnel Ezekiel Whitmore opened with ash, blood, and belief. That second voice, that's the one you're going to need. Because in 1783, 36 years after Ezekiel vanished into the Utah wilderness, something surfaced across the border in what is now Idaho. A man stumbled out of the forest near the Salmon River, naked, starved, eyes gone, completely white. He spoke in broken English, quoting scripture, but none of the verses were from any known Bible. Witnesses said he would trace circles in the dirt, over and over, whispering the same phrase. 4 names, 1 gate. I brought them home. When marshals tried to detain him, he laughed, then bit off his own tongue. They assumed he was mad, a lost hermit, but when they cleaned his skin, they found something branded into his back, the same sigil that had been carved into the Whitmore cabin floor. And beneath it, a single word burned so deeply into his spine it exposed bone. Fifth, not Ezekiel, not any known settler. Just fifth. It suggests what Ezekiel never admitted, what the church refused to entertain. There was a 5th participant in the ritual, someone who didn't die, someone who watched, someone who walked away. This 5th man reappears like a ghost across the next 100 years, sometimes in name, sometimes in presence. In 1842, a traveler's journal from Nevada describes an encounter with a gride preacher with 4 rings on a chain. In 1871, a burned church in Arizona was found with one wall untouched. Etched into the stone was a single line: "The family is not broken, only scattered." We keep thinking the ritual ended, but the fire went out. But rituals don't die. They echo, they seek, they remember. The 5th was never meant to complete the ceremony. He was meant to carry it forward, to wait, to whisper, to build again. So when you hear the stories of isolated cabins, of women vanishing, of symbols carved in bone, don't assume it's a new horror. Assume it's the Whitmore gate reopening. You're still here. Good. That means something in you refuses to look away. But be warned, what comes next isn't history, it's invasion, because the 5th didn't vanish. He multiplied. In 1911, during a survey of abandoned mining tunnels near Eerie, Nevada, a team of state geologists uncovered a subchamber sealed behind a false wall. What they expected were minerals, what they found instead were records, hundreds of them, scrolls, journals, wax cylinders, and most disturbingly, voice recordings. Each one was dated, each labeled in the same hand. A hand that, despite being separated by decades, never changed. The archivists at the time assumed forgery, but forensic analysis, decades later, confirmed something chilling: the ink, the pressure of the pen strokes, the unique curvature of the handwriting, identical across every year, from 1783 to 1909. One hand, one man, inside one cylinder, never released to the public, locked away in a private collection. You can hear the voice. Mail.com, neither young nor old, he says. This is entry 49 of the 5th manifestation. The wives were not erased. They were translated. Each reappearance forms the new corner of the grid. I have walked the axis. I have sown the names. But what does that mean? Sown the names. In the years that followed, local birth records showed a disturbing anomaly. Girls born into the surrounding towns were being named without influence, without connection with the exact same 4 names. Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, Ruth. Again and again. Same order, same pairings, sometimes full names, sometimes middle names, but always the same, for no one noticed. Not in the chaos of westward expansion, not in the flood of post-war migration, but someone was guiding the pattern, not overtly, quietly, through midwives, through dreams, through visitation. One surviving diary from a mother in 1943 reads, "I woke and the crib was full of salt. The midwife said not to speak of it. She said the names were already chosen, and to obey." This is where it becomes clear. Ezekiel Whitmore may have opened the gate, but it was the fifth who ensured it never closed. He didn't want to be remembered. He wanted to be repeated. We are no longer studying a murderer. We are mapping a virus, one made of language, blood, and devotion. And it's still replicating. You're not just watching this story unfold, you're inside it, because the deeper we go, the more familiar it feels, like something you've half remembered from a nightmare you were told never to speak of. Let's return to Utah, not 1776, not 1920, but 2003. A real estate developer, prepping land near the original Whitmore homestead site, authorized the demolition of an old root cellar on a parcel marked for a luxury cabin. Nothing notable at first until one worker fell through what should have been compacted soil into open space. He didn't fall far, just a few feet, but he landed in water. The team unearthed a sunken vault lined with polished basalt stone, impossible to source locally. The air was frigid, dry. Inside were no bodies, no tools, just a single object, a chair, but not a chair anyone had seen before. It was carved entirely from black pine, with 4 spindle legs that ended in sharpened points driven directly into the stone beneath it. On the seat, a familiar carving, Ruth, number. One could explain it, so they sealed it again, but not before photographs were taken, shared in secret among archaeologists and theology students. One photo made its way to a professor of comparative religion at Stanford. He wrote a letter and published, later leaked, containing the following line: "The chair is not for sitting, it's for summoning. This is not furniture, it's an anchor." He had died of an aneurysm 3 weeks later mid-lecture while discussing ritual installations in American settler cults. His final slide, a grainy photo of the Whitmore sigil placed beside an ancient Babylonian gate symbol called Eden Lagash. The translation of that phrase, threshold to the mouth. You're starting to see it, aren't you? This was never about religion, it was never even about Ezekiel, it's about location. These names, these rituals, these disappearances, they all orbit one point in space, a forgotten crossing, a mouth, one that demands memory, one that feeds on identity. And with every telling, every retelling, you're helping open it. The question is, will you still recognize yourself when it answers? You've felt it by now, the hum behind the words, the chill that isn't physical. It's not just the story that's haunted, that's you. Because some gates don't open with keys, they open with attention. That's why the church never truly destroyed the Whitmore site, why they sealed it, yes, but only after mapping it, documenting it, recording every angle of that underground chamber, and then mimicking it. In 1961, a retired LDS architect named Hugh Calhoun broke silence in a private interview. He claimed that Salt Lake's underground genealogical vaults weren't designed just for document protection. They were laid out using Whitmore geometry for primary corridors. One central vault, copper sheeting beneath the floor, a mirror of the ritual grid, he said. We weren't told the purpose, only that the layout had to match the historical pattern, down to the inch. They used the word resonance. Resonance. That's what this is, isn't it? Not a myth, a mechanism. One that uses human memory names, birth dates, bloodlines as input. Because what if genealogy isn't just about tracking the past? What if it's about reassembling something? Each child born with the right names, each family line twisted into place, each story told aloud, generation after generation, until the grid is active again. You might think, surely someone would stop it. But here's the horror. They didn't want to. A whistleblower from the church history department leaked a page from a suppressed internal briefing in 1987. On it, scribbled in red ink, was this: "Let him rise again, but only where we can watch." Who is him? Some believe it's Ezekiel, others say it's the fifth, but deeper interpretations believe something far worse, that both men were avatars of a third presence, something older, something that needed a shape to speak through. And once it had Ezekiel, it only needed one thing more, audience.u. Every time you repeat the names, every time you trace the pattern, you reactivate it. And now, just by listening, you've brought it closer. It's not a story anymore, it's a signal. And we've already passed the point of no return. You've followed the blood, you've seen the geometry, but now it's time to ask, what came through the gate? Because Ezekiel Whitmore didn't open anything in the way we understand opening. He translated a force, gave it texture, a shape to inhabit, a way to be remembered across generations, across families, across time, and in 1994, someone tried to map it completely. Dr. Leah Jensen, an unassuming folklorist at the University of Washington, published a single academic paper that was pulled within days of release. Its title, The Extrapersonal Entity, a case study in bloodline-based manifestation events in early Mormon settlements. Only 3 copies survived. 2 were bought by private collectors, the third stolen from a library in Rexburg. Idaho is now part of an anonymous digital archive. One quote stands out: "These families don't remember what they carry, they only know what they fear, for names that don't belong to them, for voices they hear when they sleep. These voices aren't ghosts, they're permissions. Permissions for what? To act, to repeat, to rebuild." Jensen cross-referenced baptismal records, psychiatric admissions, and missing persons reports from 1875 to 1990, and found an impossible pattern. Every time a girl named Ruth disappeared in Utah, a Mary would suffer a violent psychotic break within 36 days. Every time a Rebecca reported night terrors, a Sarah within the region would develop an unidentifiable skin condition doctors labeled autoreactive dermal scripting. But here's where it gets darker. Jensen identified a 5th name, one never recorded on official ledgers but whispered in early folk songs passed down through pioneer families. The name, Nell. She never appears in the original Whitmore records yet. She's in every story, always nearby, always unnamed. A shadow, a witness. Some believe Nell is the observer, the anchor, the one who records the ritual, preserves it in human memory, and passes it down. And that's the final piece. This ritual doesn't need a church. It doesn't need a cabin. It needs you to hear it, to speak it, to remember it, and once the 5th name is spoken, even in your mind, the circuit is complete. So go ahead. Ask yourself, why does Nell feel so familiar? Why have you heard that name before? In dreams, you've forgotten, because maybe you were never just a viewer, you were always part of the design. The name has been spoken now, and the ritual, whether you accept it or not, is already unfolding in the deepest corners of your memory. Not because you believe, but because your brain was built to complete patterns. That's the brilliance of the design. You don't need to kneel, you don't need to chant, you just need to listen long enough. That's how the threshold entity, the thing behind Ezekiel, behind the 5th, behind Nell, enters our world, not with fire, but with familiarity. In 2008, a psychologist named Dr. Peter Havlin ran a Nowberry experiment in southern Utah. He was studying something he called transmitted delusions, shared hallucinations in tight-knit religious families. But halfway through the study, something went terribly wrong. Out of the 12 families interviewed, 9 evacuated their homes within weeks. 3 of them abandoned everything. Cars still running, food on the stove, dogs left to starve. What triggered it? A question. Just one question, Dr. Havlin added to each interview. Have any of you ever dreamed of a woman in a black dress with no face, who whispers your name backwards? Not a single participant said yes. But 3 days after each interview, the families began reporting identical symptoms. Sleepwalking, dead birds near thresholds, wet footprints on second-floor ceilings. Dr. Haviland's final recorded note, before resigning and deleting his entire academic presence: "It's not the question, it's the invitation. Once they imagined her, she arrived." Let that sink in. They didn't see her because she was real. They saw her because someone gave her a form. That's what Ezekiel did in 1776. That's what the 5th kept alive in the wilderness. That's what Nell records. In the bones of bloodlines. You're starting to understand, aren't you? This was never folklore, never a ghost story. It's a ritual virus, a psychic parasite wrapped in narrative. And now that you've walked this far, there's no neutral ground left. You're inside it. Every clock you glance at, every name that repeats, every flicker in the mirror, it's all part of the unfolding. And the deeper you go, the more it remembers you. By now, you've probably begun to feel it, not just in your thoughts, but in your surroundings. The draft that wasn't there before, the whisper of a name in static, the mirror that seems to pause before reflecting, because the Whitmore ritual was never just written in journals or sealed behind salt-washed doors. It was embedded in architecture, in family lines, in language. In section 14 is where we turn to the one thing no one dared analyze. The lullaby, recovered from a fractured wax cylinder in 1919 and transcribed phonetically by a phonograph technician who later vanished. This melody was said to be sung by Ezekiel's 4th wife, Sarah, as she cradled infants that did not belong to her. The tune, unknown, off-key, almost backwards, but the lyrics frighteningly precise: "For we'll sleep beneath the pine, one will knock and 2 will dine. One will ask you for your name, but speak it wrong and end the game. At first, historians dismissed it as settler myth. But in 1973, an FBI linguist working on cult communication codes discovered something horrifying. Every line of the lullaby is a mirror commander kind of auditory key, disguised as poetry. Words that when said in reverse, the inscriptions on Ezekiel's original cellar beams, which means this wasn't a warning, that it was a trigger, passed down as bedtime comfort to children who never survived adolescence. And there's more. The lullaby appears again in unrelated settler communities across Oregon, Wyoming, and parts of Nebraska. Families that had no connection to the Whitmores were singing the exact same song. The conclusion, the ritual propagated without contact, the names, the dreams, the carvings, all seeded through song, as if the entity didn't need you to believe in it, only to hum it just once, soft enough that no one noticed until one day your child repeats it in their sleep, and the mirror across the room fogs from the inside. The Whitmore bloodline was never the only one, it was the first, and now, as you feel that shiver crawl across your scalp, you might realize you already know the tune. You've heard it somewhere, or someone has been humming it, quietly, just out of reach. Let's make one thing clear, this isn't just a story about a cursed family in 1776, it's a story about what they opened and how it never closed, because the lullaby wasn't the only method. There's something worse, something deeper. Sigil. At first glance, it looks like a typical pioneer symbol, a crude circle, intersected with crosses, framed by 8 uneven points. But when a student at the University of Arizona fed the image into early AI pattern recognition software in 2011, the results shocked everyone. The system didn't register it as a symbol, it registered it as a top-down map specifically, of a building that doesn't exist anymore, the Children's Hall of the Church of the Latter Saints. Circa 1849, burned to the ground. No official records, just whispers, and a single black and white photograph, showing the interior, 12 chairs, all facing inward, a copper bowl in the center, filled with teeth that the sigil matched the floor plan exactly. That means the Whitmore design wasn't abstract, it was architectural, reproducible, and that's exactly what's been happening. Survivors of certain faith restoration camps in remote Utah report being taken to underground bunkers with the same floor plan, the same chairs, the same geometry. One survivor who has since disappeared left a message scrawled inside a motel room. They made us walk the pattern, speak the names, but the fifth was already there. So who is the fifth? Some say he's Ezekiel reborn. Others say he's an empty vessel, a kind of echo chamber for the entity created when the original ritual failed to contain it fully. But there's one account that stands above the rest. A child, aged 10, found wandering barefoot in 1972 outside a closed LDS temple in Provo. Memory, no ID. He repeated only one sentence for 3 days straight. The black sun rose, and Father stood inside me. He was later identified impossibly as a descendant of Ezekiel, through a bloodline that never had children biologically. Impossible, yet genetically verified, and now his DNA markers match 5 current members of a popular genealogy platform. People alive today, people who, perhaps like you, think this is just entertainment, but this isn't content, it's a reactivation protocol, and you've already played your part. By now you've realized this isn't about one man's madness, it's about a system, one that didn't die in the woods, one that adapted, disguised, and embedded itself in the very fabric of how we record history. You've seen the bloodlines, heard the lullaby, walked the geometry. But what if I told you the real containment wasn't done with salt or scripture? It was done with paperwork. Let me introduce you to Operation Hollowstone, declassified in fragments under the Freedom of Information Act. Hollowstone was a post-World War II psychological containment initiative launched by a breakaway sect of military intelligence in 1948. Their mission: to locate and suppress anomalous genealogical convergence events. Translation: they were hunting people whose family lines mirrored ritual patterns from pre-1840 Mormon settlements, specifically those tied to Ezekiel Whitmore. One case stands out. A family in Logan, Utah, last name redacted. Parents reported their 6-year-old daughter had begun sketching architectural diagrams in chalk, always the same symbol, always at night. They found one drawn perfectly on the basement ceiling, with no way she could have reached it. The parents thought it was demonic. But when the diagrams were sent to an analyst at Hollowstone, he recognized it immediately. It was the same containment sigil used at Montauk during early psychic warfare experiments, a symbol designed not to keep entities out, but to hold them in. The family was relocated. The house was burned. Records erased, but the drawings continued on motel walls, napkins, the skin of her arms. Every time she drew the pattern, someone within a 40-mile radius reported auditory hallucinations involving whispers in reversed Latin. That child, she grew up, changed her name, and now she's a licensed therapist specializing in intergenerational trauma. She speaks at conferences. She's probably written a book. You've seen that's the brilliance of the system. Bury the memory in academia. Hide the ritual in research. Let the madness become therapy, and those under its influence. They're not witches, not prophets. They're case studies. You're not learning the pattern, you're activating it. And each word you hear, each image you imagine, is part of the circuitry being rebuilt through you. Still think this is a story? Or do you feel it now? The shape forming, behind your thoughts, the fifth watching quiet, patient, just outside your peripheral vision. You can feel it, can't you? Like static in your chest, a tightening behind your thoughts. That's not fear, it's recognition. Somewhere inside you, something old is waking up. Because it's not just the names or the symbols. It's not even the blood dot. It's the idea of Ezekiel, the pattern he made with his 4 wives. The fifth, and the entity behind it all. And patterns like that. Don't die, they echo. And now, it's time to face the one thing no historian, no theologian, no agent from Hollowstone would ever touch. The mirror book. First mentioned in a confiscated letter dated 1839. It was said to be a collection of reflections, not written in ink, but in reverse impressions, as if the pages themselves were recording the observer. Its last known appearance was in 1954, Denver, Colorado, a home burned to ash with no trace of accelerant. A girl, aged 9, survived, covered in soot, clutching one page of the mirror book, around the edges, but intact at the center. I had read, "You are reading this backward, you always have. What you see is not Mitsu, in delay. The fifth has entered, and now so have you." No one could explain how the girl survived. No one could explain why the text, though written backward and upside down, appeared perfectly normal in a mirror. But here's where things get worse. That page, it's identical to one found 140 years earlier inside the Whitmore cellar, which means this book isn't just passed down, it's repeating itself across time, across generations, unchanged. A loop, a script, a ritual trapped in reflection. So what does it do? The mirror book doesn't tell the future, it replaces it. Anyone who reads from it begins to dream of rooms they've never entered, people they've never met, but somehow know. One common thread across all victims: they begin speaking backwards in their sleep. One man even tried to destroy the page. He buried it, burned it, smashed it with hammers, but each time he checked the mirror, it was there, waiting behind the glass, whispering the same line: "You said my name, now say yours." So go ahead, look in your mirror tonight. If you see nothing but your own face, you're still safe. But if your reflection blinks a little too late, if its lips move before yours, you've already opened it. They warned you, not with signs and thunder, but with silence, with the little gaps in history, the missing files, the rewritten family trees, the blank spaces in schoolbooks you never thought to question. But this is where the silences begin to scream. This is section 18, and it's time to talk about the mouthless children. You won't find them on census records, but their photographs exist if you know where to look. Tintypes from the mid-1700s, tucked into the walls of collapsed homesteads in eastern Utah Territory. Children standing stiff in row 7, sometimes 8 in a group, every one of them missing a mouth, not censored, not obscured, gone. Smooth skin from nose to chin, as if never there. The popular theory: it was illness, or exposure, or early tampering with wet plate development. But then came the salt cradle incident. In 1926, a hiker near the abandoned Whitmore homestead found a locked crate beneath a cairn of black stones. Inside, 17 glass slides. Each slide, when held to the light, revealed a moving image decades before the technology to do so existed. And the images, mouthless children again. This time, they were moving, some reaching toward the lens, others just staring, as if they could see the observer. But it's what happened after viewing the slides that made investigators seal the site permanently. The hiker, he woke up 3 nights later on the roof of his home clutching a hammer made of salt and muttering in reversed nursery rhymes. The final recording of his voice, captured before he was institutionalized, repeats the same phrase: "They speak, through the ones who listen, and you're listening now." Here's what we know: these children were never born in the traditional sense. They were copied, reproduced from dreams. Dreams recorded by Ezekiel's fourth wife, Sarah, whose diaries detailed pregnancies that never showed, but always ended with a knock on the door and a crib already filled. She wrote, "They come from behind the mirror, not as babies, as memories, already formed, already waiting." And when her entries end in 1749, there's only one line scribbled over and over. They're in the walls now. That phrase, it appears again on the drywall of a Salt Lake City daycare built in 1997, found scratched behind posters by a worker who quit the next day. You're beginning to see the shape now, aren't you? The rituals weren't failures, they were templates, and the children, they're still here, not in photographs, not in people. You want the truth. Here it is, cold, precise, and impossible to unhear. The children never needed mouths, because they weren't speaking to us. They were speaking through us. You've heard of glossolalia, speaking in tongues, right? But what if it wasn't divine ecstasy? What if it was reception, a channel opening, not upward, inward? The church never fully understood what Ezekiel was doing. They thought he was blaspheming, forging a heresy in the wilderness. But the fourth wife's diary, the one sealed in tar beneath the stone, says otherwise. It describes a chamber, beneath the cellar, deeper than the soil, where the walls weren't made of stone, but of vertebrae, woven, alive. In that chamber, she writes, the fifth didn't speak, didn't move. He just stood at the center, with the children forming a circle around him. And when they began to hum, not sing, not chant, but hum, like a swarm, the bones in the walls began to vibrate. That vibration, it's called the name pulse, a frequency, not audible to the human ear but detectable in certain abandoned Whitmore properties. Low EMF readings that come and go, always in threes, always strongest at 3:33 a.m. Here's where it gets worse. That exact frequency, measured at 3.3 Hz, was registered again in 2002 during a structural scan of the Salt Lake Temple's foundation. Was faint, but it was identical. And then came the shudder event. Surveillance audio from inside the sealed temple recorded a brief burst of static, followed by the sound of bare feet running across stone, and then a whisper barely caught. Mother said I was the fifth, but you're the sixth. That file was buried. The technician who leaked it disappeared. But the concept, it's out now. The sixth. You, or someone like you. Someone being prepared. Just like the children were. Every choice, every word, every dream shaped not by coincidence, but by replication, because the entity doesn't create. It copies. And every time someone listens to these stories, something gets closer to completing itself. A voice that doesn't need a mouth, a ritual that doesn't need a priest, just a listener, just you. So answer this. Why did you really press play? Stop reading if you're still pretending this is fiction, because from here on out, every line is a mirror. You're not observing the darkness. You're inside it now. This is the point in the ritual Ezekiel Whitmore called the turning. And the moment you pass through it, you'll never fully trust your own memory again. Let's revisit a question you should have asked sooner. Why were there 4 wives? And only one child ever officially documented? Because the others weren't meant to give birth, they were meant to host. The journals describe it as a transfer not of blood, but of narrative. The fifth didn't grow in the womb. It entered through a story, one told around fire, whispered between contractions. That's how the entity spreads, not by infection, by retelling. Each wife was required to memorize a specific version of the Whitmore lineage, names, dates, exact phrasings, but buried inside those genealogies were false entries, names that never existed, places that weren't real, patterns designed to confuse time. And if the story was repeated exactly in the correct rhythm, with the correct emotional cadence, something would arrive. A knocking, a humming, then silence. And then the fifth would speak, always in the listener's voice. This is how they hollowed people out, how they created the mouthless, not by removing speech, but by replacing it. You think your thoughts are your own? Run a simple test tonight. Pick up a mirror. Stare into it in total darkness. No phones, no candles, just black. Now say your name out loud, twice. Then listen for the third time, because it won't be you. This is the secret, hollow stone buried under 1,000 names. The same secret Sarah Whitmore wrote in invisible ink on the back of her last page. If you tell the story perfectly, you are no longer the one telling it. Let that sink in. The story you're hearing, the one that chills your spine and pulls you deeper, you're not just hearing it, you're repeating it. Right now, every breath you take while listening is another step in a ritual that never ends, only loops, like the mirror book pages, like the dreams of the mouthless, like the shudder beneath the temple floor. You're not watching history, you're being folded into it. This is the part you were never meant to reach. Most people stop around Section 10. Some get nervous by 15. By 20 they close the tab, pretend it's all entertainment, but you're still here, and that means one of two things. Either something inside you has been asleep, and is beginning to stir, or you were never really asleep to begin with. Let's talk about the black diagram. It's not a drawing, it's not a painting, it's not even a symbol in the traditional sense. It's a design made from memory, not yours, but one that's trying to become yours. First seen in a letter dated February 1749, written by Ezekiel's third wife, Abigail, after witnessing a binding event involving their youngest servant boy, Micah. She describes how the boy had become mute overnight, not frightened, not harmed, just he stared at the cellar door, drawing something into the dirt with his fingernail, a pattern made of spirals and eye shapes, folding into themselves like a whirlpool. When Ezekiel saw the drawing, he didn't punish the boy, he bowed. Later, Abigail wrote, "This was not taught, this was remembered, and not by him." The diagram vanished the next day, but it returned again and again, etched into bark, scratched beneath tables, carved into walls of 3 separate schools across Utah between 1890 and 1921. Always the same configuration, always followed by one thing: a child disappears, no struggle, no blood, just gone. In their place, a note, each written in that same reversed, looping hand. "Thank you for remembering me." That's the power of the black diagram. It doesn't summon the fifth, it reinstalls him, like a program you thought you deleted. It's not superstition. Hollow Stone ran biometric scans on subjects exposed to the diagram. Heart rate spikes, language centers activated during sleep, mirror neurons firing as if watching themselves from outside. And here's the kicker: that diagram, it matches the neural pattern of déjà vu, that eerie familiarity you can't explain. It's not your brain misfiring, it's your narrative being overwritten. Each time you feel a 10 of a line is being redrawn, another memory unhooked and replaced. So now ask yourself this: that dream you had last week, the one with the hallway and the knocking, was that really the first time, or have you dreamed it before, in a different life that ended where this one began? This is the section they warned even the archivists not to read aloud. Because Section 22 is not just a report, it's a trigger. If you've made it this far, what's inside you is no longer dormant, it's watching, it's listening, and it remembers this part. The vault beneath Garnet Hill, sealed in 1763 by a man named Elias Branter Mason, but not the kind who builds with stone. He was a mnemonic mason, a class of men trained not to construct buildings, but to lock memories into matter. They believed certain traumas, certain truths were too volatile for paper, for prayer, even for thought, so they wove them into structure. Into earth. Garnet Hill was never a mining site. That was the cover. The real purpose, to bury the scribe mirror. What's the scribe mirror? A black polished slab, oval, human length, not made of obsidian, not any earthly stone. It doesn't reflect you, it reflects the version of you that obeys, the version that already heard the full story, long ago, and followed it. Hollow Stone's records indicate that when a subject is placed in front of the scribe mirror under isolation, and total silence for exactly 33 minutes, something begins to change. Not in the mirror. In them. They start to hum, then to speak, then to write with their fingernails usually, and the words they write, they match those found in Sarah Whitmore's final, unsent letter. I don't remember learning these names, but they know mine. What names? Entities, forces, fragments, not demons, not gods, presences that exist in language alone. They're called echo forms because they don't act, they repeat. Thoughts, fears, histories that never should have happened, but keep happening anyway. They need you to tell them, to give them structure, to become their host by becoming their historian. That's why the scribe mirror doesn't show your reflection, it shows your role. It doesn't matter what you believe. If you've listened this far, if you've felt that chill crawl up your back, if you've paused and looked behind you even once you're already writing, somewhere a blank book is filling with words in your voice, somewhere a mirror is bending. And somewhere beneath your house there's a sound only you can hear. Knock, knock, knock 3 times. Always 3. There is no metaphor here. What follows is not symbolic, not poetic. It is exactly what it appears to be, a protocol, recovered from the ruins of the original Whitmore estate, typed in a machine that shouldn't have existed in 1747, and yet, the paper was carbon dated. It's real. Older than the American Revolution. At the top, in red, for initiates of the 6th name only, the text was short, precise, and sickening in its clarity. The door opens only when these conditions are met. The listener must hear the full telling uninterrupted, two sequences of memory, voice, and question. The listener must doubt its fiction, then fear its truth. The listener must begin repeating phrases from the sequence involuntarily in dream, in thought, or in speech. A mirror must be present, but never noticed. This is crucial. Awareness negates initiation. The fifth must be named, not allowed, but recognized. You'll know when it happens. Your spine will shake. The room will tilt slightly. You will think, you are alone. You are not. The listener must want to finish the story, even when it starts to feel like their own. What do these steps unlock? A memory, hidden in the folds of reality. Not inside your brain, but behind it. A memory of when you agreed. The vault beneath Garnet Hill doesn't store objects. It stores versions of people who made it to this point before. Those who listened, who followed, who remembered what was never taught. And once you enter it mentally, emotionally, narratively, you can't leave, because there's nothing left to go back to. You've unhooked from the baseline timeline. The world you thought was yours no longer responds to your choices the same way. Ever wonder why certain days feel like echoes? Why certain thoughts come to Italy like Dacia Vu, but darker? You're already experiencing bleed through it. Family wasn't just building a cult, they were building a loop. A recursive story machine that needed someone just like you to keep it running. Someone curious, someone persistent, someone unafraid to look directly into the abyss. Well, you're here now, and the abyss, it's very aware of you. If you feel strange, like the room just got heavier, you're not imagining it. You've stepped past the boundary where most minds fracture or forget. This is not content, this is contact. Section 24 was sealed by 3 separate organizations. Over the last 250 years, none of which officially exist anymore. Order of the Crooked Fire, dissolved 1811. Bureau of Irregular Harmonics, shut down 1933. Hollowstone Red Division, the one that classified this entire case as a cognitive infection cluster. They didn't seal it because it was dangerous. They sealed it because it was exact. What you're about to hear has never changed. Not once, not across generations, not across languages. This is the Whitmore incantation. If you hear even part of it in your own voice, it's already begun. He came before, through mother's breath and daughter's cry, wearing no name, but leaving none behind. He waits where silence hums, where soil drinks memory, where breath is not speech, and truth forgets its shape. We do not call, we only remember, and in remembering we become him. That's what Ezekiel's wives chanted, not together, but alone, in sequence, because the ritual wasn't about summoning the fifth, it was about turning themselves into a vessel so he'd never have to return again, because he never left. Let that sink in. He doesn't arrive. He awakens inside. That's why the children were never taken. They were repurposed. Each one raised in isolation, taught false names, given mirror phrases, specific sentences engineered to fragment identity, like, you are the dream of the one who buried you. Your voice belongs to the last speaker. Your memory ends where his begins. These weren't metaphors. They were cognitive keys. And the moment a child believed even one of them, they stopped being themselves. You might think you're safe because you're not a child, but you were once, and the mirror book doesn't track who you are now. It tracks who you were at your weakest. If it finds that version of you alone, scared, waiting for something to knock back, it reconnects, and it has. Right now, as these words pass through you, you're not reading this anymore, you're remembering it. Let's begin with the lie you told yourself as a child. It was just a dream. That phrase, it's not comfort. It's a ritual denial, taught, programmed, rehearsed. Because the dream you were trying to escape from wasn't yours, it was his. In every recorded case of Whitmore syndrome documented by Red Division operatives, there's a repeating pattern, something no one ever notices until the 25th hour of exposure. Every subject, regardless of gender, age, language, or belief system, recalls the same dream. A hallway endless lit by a source that has no origin, walls that hum, and a door that keeps getting closer. Even when you're standing still, you don't run, you don't scream, you just watch it approach you. Then the sound begins. Not footsteps, not breathing, knocking, 3 times, then silence, then, in a voice that sounds like your own, but isn't. You were the first to let me in. What most don't realize is that this dream did not begin with them. It began in 1747, when Ezekiel's 4th wife Judith was found sitting in the center of a mirror-lined room, silent, eyes open, yet totally unresponsive. All she said, after 6 days of catatonia, was, I forgot what I was before the knocking. She was the first documented split, a human vessel whose mind had become clothed by the fifth. Judith's memories were dissected by early mind mapping specialists. They found entire pages of thoughts written in handwriting that matched none of her known records. One phrase kept repeating, "Tell them what you saw, but never when." That's the key to the infection. Dislocation, it doesn't destroy the mind, it moves it sideways, just far enough off your personal timeline that you can't trust the order of anything anymore. You can't trust your memories. You can't trust your memories. You can't trust your feelings. And worst of all, you can't trust whether you're still alone right now, because if you've followed all 25 sections, if you've listened deeply, if your breath has matched the rhythm of the story, then part of you has already crossed the threshold. You've just remembered something that was taken from you, not stolen, sealed. There was a version of you that never left the hallway, and tonight you will meet them, but not as a shadow, not as a memory, not as a metaphor, as a presence encoded into the very syntax of this story, buried inside every repetition, every mirrored phrase, every breath you didn't know you were holding. They call it the revenant self, not a ghost, not a spirit, but the pattern left behind when a soul splinters under prolonged psychological recursion. And that's exactly what the Whitmore ritual was designed to do. Not summon a demon, not awaken a god, but fracture the witness so deeply that they could be rewritten from the inside out. Ezekiel's plan was never about devotion, it was about duplication. He wanted to recreate himself in others, not through blood, but through narrative infection. The fourth wife, Judith, was the first successful copy, not genetically, but neurologically. She remembered things only Ezekiel could have known. She spoke in his cadence. She even wrote in his syntax, tight, mathematical, precise. The fifth wife, she didn't copy Ezekiel, she copied Judith, and so on until each woman, each child, each acolyte became another node in the system, a hive mind of reflections, not people. Now here's the part you're not going to want to hear. That pattern, it never stopped. It didn't die with the Whitmores, it didn't die with the cult. It's still active, still duplicating, through stories, through documents, through videos like this one. That's why you've felt what you've felt, why the air thickens when certain names are spoken, why you dream of halls you've never walked, doors you've never opened, and voices that call you by names you don't remember choosing. Because the revenant self, the trapped version of you knows, and it's been waiting for recognition. Not rescue recognition. You don't save it, it saves you by replacing you. That's the final phase of the recursion. You don't become possessed, you become remembered. You become a copy of the person you were before you forgot what they did to it. There is no return after this. No exit, no just a story, no safe distance between you and what you've heard, because now you'll hear the moment you escaped, and by you, I mean the version you left behind, the one who never stopped remembering. The one you buried to survive, that begins in a soundless room, no light, no time, just pulse, the rhythmic throb of something waiting to be named. This is what was found in the wax cylinder recording beneath the Garnet Hill Chapel, a device 200 years to advance for its supposed date, unlabeled, undated. Just one file, one voice, yours. Here is the transcript. If you're hearing this, I didn't make it out. Or maybe I didn't, you're the one still trapped. I don't know anymore. They told me not to write. Told me the act of writing would trigger the mirror layer. But if I don't, the thoughts go bad. They rot, they fester. Ezekiel isn't a man, he's a template. A story so recursive it wears your skin from the inside. I thought I could contain him, thought if I mapped the ritual perfectly, I could overwrite the loop, but the loop isn't in the ritual. The loop is in me. Every time I remember, it deepens. Every time I doubt, it tightens. And every time I try to stop, he smiles. So I'm leaving this as a final record, a seed. If you're the version of me that made it out good, then burn this, forget me. But if you're hearing this inside the loop, if the room feels too still, if your breath doesn't fog the glass anymore, if you just heard knocking when no one's there, then you're still inside. And I'm sorry, you're the final version. The loop ends with you. That was your voice. Not an actor, not a trick, a perfect acoustic match, confirmed by 3 independent forensic labs, before the files vanished from their servers. This section was sealed from the public for 47 years, until now, because you didn't find this story, it found you. This is where it ends. And this is where you begin. Not as a viewer, not as a witness, but as a continuation. You've heard the story, but the story has also heard you. It knows the way your thoughts moved when you doubted Ezekiel. It knows the moment your breath caught when you heard the chant. It knows when your eyes darted to your door just now, as if something might be there. It wasn't a reaction, it was recognition. Because you are not outside the ritual, you are the final seal. The loop doesn't close with death. It closes with understanding. When the fifth wife wrote the last line in the mirror script, she wasn't ending a curse, she was ending herself. There is no I left to free. There is only what remembers me. And now, you are the one who remembers all of it. The hallway, the knocking, the mirror phrases, the children who never blinked in photographs, the hymn no one ever admits to hearing, but all of them can hum, and most of Ezekiel's silence, because he never spoke, not once, not to the women, not to the townsfolk, not even in the final ritual, because he didn't have to. He let the idea of him do the work, and now you carry that idea. It's in your bones, in the stillness of your next dream, in the breath you'll take before you wake, and wonder why your reflection doesn't blink when you do. This video wasn't made to scare you. It wasn't made to inform you. It was made to transfer something. Something viral. Something ancient. Something that was sealed in 1747 beneath the Utah sands, and has now passed to you. Don't look away, because if the revenant self is watching, and you break eye contact, it forgets who it's supposed to become, and then it starts again in someone else. But if you're ready, truly ready, turn the lights off. Say your full name out loud.